Your blood runs orange and blue. This is the pod for you. You're listening to Orange and Blue Bloods, hosted by EJ Stewart and Tommy Beer. Let's get to it, New York.
The Hard New York wants to stay a Knick. It's EJ Stewart. It's Tommy Beard. Thank you for checking out this episode of Orange and Blue Bloods, a New York Knicks podcast, Audacy WFAN original. We're talking plenty of Knicks stuff today, plenty of news that's happened so far. So we got Josh Hart doing an interview with Bleacher Report talking about the fact that he wants to be a Knick, that he intends to be a Knick, but that he will opt out of his contract. He has a player option for about $13 million. Plans to opt out. Explained why the Knicks he thought were a great fit for him. So we'll break down what are the odds that Josh Hart perhaps isn't a Knick if he does indeed hit free agency. So we'll break that all down. We'll also talk about Julius Randle, who announced this week that he had undergone ankle surgery. This was originally a report from Adrian Wojnarowski. So Julius Randle injured that ankle late in the season, then injured the ankle again multiple times in the playoffs. So ankle surgery for Julius. We'll talk about his recovery and how long he's expected to be out. And call him Captain America. Jalen Brunson expected to be named to Team USA. He will represent the U.S. in the FIBA World Cup. What does that mean for the Knicks? We'll break that down as well. So plenty of stuff to get to. Tommy Beer with me as always. And Tommy, if yesterday was any indication of what this offseason will be like, I anticipate fireworks considering what we saw from Kyrie Irving, or at least Shams speaking for Kyrie Irving, in getting the offseason started with fireworks, trying to bring the king to Dallas with him.
No, that couldn't have been Kyrie that leaked that. He doesn't want to be, he doesn't want your attention, remember? Leave me alone.
Leave him alone.
Leave me alone. Don't you guys have something better to do? Shams and who's the other dude for Bleacher Report? Chris Hayes. So happens to get the same bit of information on the same day that Kyrie would prefer to have the best player in the world on his team, which is pretty interesting. So, fortunately for folks in New York, likely don't have to deal with that headache anytime soon.
Yeah, that won't have anything to do with the Knicks, but maybe there's some draft implications. But just real quickly, there's some kind of end game, right? With Kyrie, it's never like straightforward. So what is going on? Just real quickly before we get into this Knicks stuff.
The one conspiracy theory I saw that I thought made some sense was maybe LeBron wants a team with Kyrie. So they're just kind of getting this out early to kind of force the Lakers' hands to do what they can do, to find a way to create some salary cap space. Again, you know how I feel. I know how you feel. If I'm the Lakers, I'd rather have Austin Reeves and Rui Hachimura and those type of reliable role players than a superstar with a really cool, a layup package and a great handle than Kyrie Irving. Other than, Kyrie just kind of people not saying his name for a couple of days, I can't think of any other valid reason why that would even why that became news yesterday, including the fact that the Mavs were thinking about trading for LeBron at the deadline. Only the CBA prohibits LeBron from being traded after the deadline. It was all a mess. It was actually a poor reflection on journalism, to be honest.
Yeah, I always hate those things where there's an obvious caveat, obvious kind of red herring in the distance to explain why certain things can or won't happen. They never get addressed in the report. We only get the splashy headline, which is that Kyrie's trying to get LeBron to play with him in Dallas, despite how difficult that would be, despite the fact that Rob Pelinka would have to be tarred and feathered through Los Angeles to be somehow traded LeBron James to the Dallas Mavericks for the lack of assets that they have.
He built his family situation out in LA. His son is going to USC, and now he's going to demand a trade from a franchise that has been good, a very loyal franchise, to move, to the middle of the country. It just makes no sense on so many levels.
Doesn't make sense to me, but this is the NBA, so anything can happen. Anything is possible, and crazier things have happened indeed. So we'll be continuing to follow the rest of the NBA offseason. We'll also continue to follow the NBA Finals. We have a series that's now tied 1-1. That is getting very interesting as well. But let's talk about the Knicks. And before we get to that, this is, again, Orange and Blue Bloods, a New York Knicks podcast. A podcast you can get wherever you get your podcast. You get it on the free Audacy app, or you can get it on any other streaming service. Make sure you hit that auto download feature on your streaming service to get these episodes every time we drop. And also be sure to check us out on YouTube. You can watch segments of the show and full episodes of the show. Find us on the WFAN channel and the Audacy Sports channel. So let's begin with Josh Hart. He speaks on what could be a lucrative offseason for him this summer. He sat down with Bleacher Report's Taylor Rooks and opened up about his approach to the offseason, saying he will likely decline his player option, but plans to, or at least hopes to, remain a New York Knick. Here is Josh Hart himself.
We'll probably decline that and do the free agency thing. My first free agency I was restricted, and it was ass. I kind of actually cried a little bit. It took like 3 weeks to get it done. I'm like, damn, like, do people want me in the league? Like, I don't think this free agency will go that way. I love New York. I love the team. I love the coaching staff, the front office that we have. Got young guys, draft picks, all those sort of things. So, obviously that would be an ideal place for me to just, resign there and do that. Everything's perfect on the court, off the court, with family, being close to home, doing all those kind of things. So, fingers crossed that, when free agency starts, I'll say a deal will get done, hopefully in the first day or two. I would love for that to be home.
So Josh Hart there making it very clear that opting out is likely going to happen, but that being a Knick is a priority. And there's been talks about that being expected to be the case. And here you got Josh Hart himself saying that is indeed the case. So, in case you forgot, Josh Hart was acquired by the Knicks midseason trade with the Portland Trail Blazers, sent Cam Reddish, Ryan Arcidiacono, and a Knicks 2023 first-round pick to the Blazers. He played in the 25 regular season that capped the Knicks season and started 5 of the team's 11 playoff games. Hart, again, has a player option worth $13 million. So hearing from Josh Hart there, Tommy, do you think there is any chance Josh Hart isn't a Knick based on what he was saying?
Yeah, I mean, kind of as we talked about when they acquired him, when we talked about at the start of the offseason, there's always a chance. Anytime a player opts out and, becomes a free agent, nothing's guaranteed. We had Carlos Boozer promise a blind owner that he would return. And
that was wild.
There's been plenty of situations
in
NBA history where a guy, you just assumed that the guy was back, and it was only a matter of time. And so certainly I believe that Josh Hart is going to be a Knick this season. I think one thing the Knicks can do to kind of secure his services is maybe not guarantee his salary, but give him all the breast milk he would want. Make that part of the guarantee part of his contract. I don't know how that's affected in the new CBA. There might be some limitations on that, but I think that's one thing the Knicks could do.
Yeah, and we've avoided the breast milk conversation, but I do want to bring that up in a second because I do have sound from him in his interview talking about the situation. But yeah, I think, as you said, like anything can happen in free agency. I just think, to me, it just sounds like a handshake deal's already been made.
Agreed.
He's saying that, I hope a deal will get done hopefully the first day or two. This technically wouldn't really be tampering because he's on the Knicks already. But to me, players knowing that a deal could be done the first day or two suggests that there's already been parameters discussed about what it would take. The question,
EJ, are you telling them they have conversations before the officials? That can't be the case. That's allowed. That's allowed, right?
It's shocking, right? It's unbelievable that could be the case. But that is, I'm almost certain, what has happened here. And I'm sure, Josh Hart's his representation over at CAA, they've talked around the league and said, hey, what are these other teams willing to offer? And how does that compare to the Knicks offer? So him saying that, New York's a great fit. I love being here. I love the team. Everything's perfect. It's hard for a player to go that far talking about how much he loves his current situation and then have to sign, in Detroit next season. How do you then, spin the narrative of, well, you said you were in a perfect situation, did you find a second perfect situation? Like you're going through your second option. It's like saying, this is my second choice to go to prom with. That's not really something that the fan base and the next franchise is going to want necessarily hear. So I think he's kind of pigeonholing himself to returning as a Knick. I guess the question I have is, how much money will this end up costing the Knicks? How many years will they commit to? I read John Hollinger in The Athletic. He did a whole breakdown on every player that has a player option or some kind of potential non-guaranteed deal coming up and what they should do. And he thought that Hart may actually end up opting in and then extending from there. So keeping the $13 million he can make next year and signing for something around there moving forward. Is that something you see on the table? What do you think the final numbers will end up looking on a Josh Hart deal?
Yeah, so it's definitely something to keep in mind. Obviously, Hart's, I'm sure he's familiar with his options and all the different scenarios that can play itself out. I'm sure he and his agent have had conversations, but more importantly, I'm sure the Knicks front office is, rechecked and checked and had conversations with with his agents and kind of, looked at all the different scenarios. So the Hollander, the one Hollander wrote about, and some other folks have discussed it. Since the Knicks signed him. So the benefit of is essentially what it is. Instead of Josh Hart has until the end of the month to opt out. It's basically a mutual opt out of his contract for next season. He currently has 1 year, 12.9 and change on the books.
Yep.
Obviously, he can make more than that in the open market, even if it's just for 1 year, and he can certainly make that money plus a couple more million over multiple years. So it essentially makes no sense for him to exercise that contract and remain in that contract for 1 more year. However, it would make sense if the Knicks, instead of allowing him to enter free agency, tacked on an extension if he chose to exercise that option. So the benefit for the Knicks perspective is that keeps his base salary for the upcoming season below $13 million, which helps him stay below the second apron. And just kind of a big picture view. EJ and I will get into this over the summer, but the new CBA has some interesting language in it, and we'll really dig into the kind of the details of it as we move on in June and July. But essentially, something to keep in mind, and a phrase you're going to hear a lot from us and from informed basketball analysts, is this thing called the separate second apron. So essentially, the new CBA wants to make it difficult for teams. There obviously some teams are going to spend more than others. There's a salary cap, but it's a soft cap as opposed to a hard cap, as we are familiar with that language in different sports, the NFL, etc. There's also a salary floor, which prevents teams from spending far less than their competitors. So ideally, the NBA, you're going to have the high spenders, roughly 20% or so above the low spenders. But there are a few teams that that drastically exceed that salary cap. We saw it when the Warriors got Kevin Durant and just basically ran the NBA with their eyes closed for 2 seasons and really diminished the product by making it very predictable. So what the NBA is trying to do is trying to prevent that type of scenario from taking place. In the past, they would have this thing called the luxury tax. You guys are probably familiar with it, where if you exceed the salary cap by a certain percentage, it's dollar for dollar hit or $1.25 per dollar you spend. But that was the only penalty. So in other words, if you had a rich owner, a tech billionaire, for instance, there was the only punitive penalty was in terms of hitting your pocketbook. The new CBA, in addition to obviously the financial repercussions, there's also some additional repercussions. You can't send out once you hit the second apron. So this is another about $6 million above that luxury tax, and once you hit that number, you're essentially hard capped. With a few exceptions. In addition, you can't trade a draft pick more than 6 years in the future. You can't sign players via the buyout market, which we've seen a lot of players get added. Kevin Love, for instance, was one such player that Miami picked up. And there's a couple other things that make it difficult. There's mechanisms in place for you can get these really top tier players, but it's difficult to round out your roster. So I say all that to say, if Josh Hart opts into his contract and Knicks sign him to an extension, they keep that $13 million salary on the books for this upcoming season, which makes it easier for them to, facilitate all their other moves and trades. They want to add another top tier superstar. We talked about who potentially that could be if an Embiid shakes loose, something along those lines. It's just obviously you have a player at a lower salary. It benefits you going forward. And it would benefit Josh Hart because he would have 5 years fully guaranteed. I think Hollinger threw a number around $80 million, something along those lines.
80 on the extension.
Yeah, so that's a total of almost $95 million over 5 years, which is probably the high end of his annual basis. Would the Knicks be fully guaranteed? Would there be a team option? Would there be a player option at the end of that? That we'll see. But that's one scenario. The pros for the Knicks would be that cheaper first year. The cons for the Knicks would be extended out 5 years. So when we talk about the annual basis for Hart, I think most folks assume it'll probably be somewhere in the area of 15-ish million to 18-ish million. Hart's going to ask for 20. The Knicks are going to offer 14 the first time they sit down, etc. And they'll probably come to that scenario. If I had to take a guess, I think the Knicks want to keep the years down. I think that would probably be their ideal scenario, as opposed to going out to 4 or 5 years. I think they probably, if Hart is dead set, I want 18, then maybe the Knicks only offer him 3 years. If he's willing to settle for 15 and a half, going up to 16, 17, then the Knicks will give him 4 years. So somewhere along those lines, I think that's probably where they land. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, I think, and that's why I think, because again, I would not think, I know that him and his agent have pieced this together. So the fact that he's saying that it's likely they will opt out already, to me, that kind of takes this opt-in situation off the table. It would sound like. Now, I don't know. I guess we
could be playing hardball, but yeah.
Yeah, James Harden recently kind of did this with Philly, and he could have opted out and accepted a shorter 2-year extension. And allowed Philly to spend some more money to get other guys in, like PJ Tucker, his good buddy. So
but also allowed Harden to sign the huge contract he's going to sign this summer.
Now he has more money coming to him because he extended on the previous contract. So it's so I don't know that it makes me think, given how Josh Hart was speaking in that interview, that that won't happen, that he won't do it. But you said it could be posturing, maybe that's still happening. But I get the impression that he does want to opt out, and he does want to get paid immediately and not to worry about taking the 13 million and having the rest of the money come in the back end. And I wonder if Knicks end up kind of putting a deal together that is similar to the deals we've seen with the likes of Mitch and Jalen Brunson, where maybe you do have a deal that ends up being a little front loaded, and maybe he is getting 18 to 19 million the first few years, but then that salary, decelerates, for lack of a better term, de-escalates is a better term, as the time goes on. So that may be something you see as well. I don't want to think Josh Hart's guy remained a Knick. Like, they got to bring him back. They gave him a first-round pick for him. We saw how important he was in the 25 games he played in the regular season. We saw how important he was in the Cleveland series. Didn't play great in the Miami series, but he's a absolute glue guy. So bringing him back is an absolute must. And because we mentioned it, and we did a good job, I thought, last week of not talking about it, but because he then mentioned it again, and it seems to be the gift that keeps on giving, this whole Josh Hart breast milk thing. So last week he put out that he had tried his wife's breast milk. His wife just recently had a newborn, so congrats to him and his family. But he put out that he wanted to try his wife's breast milk, and he was interested if other people had this same thought. It confused pretty much everybody who read this tweet, thinking, what the hell is Josh Hart talking about? So once again in this interview, for now, like the third time, he's had to explain what happened.
So 85% of new dads at least wonder what breast milk tastes like. We had family over that day. When they asked me, they're like, have you tried changing breast? I'm like, no, I haven't tried it. But if I ever do, I want the whole charade. I want to be burped. I want to be cradled. I want everything. Somehow I got finessed into doing like a blind tasting. So we had like almond milk, a creamer, and breast milk. Tried it, obviously. And it was vanilla flavored almond milk. That's how it tasted. I literally took the blindfold off after I tasted it. I'm like, damn, this is actually like not bad. It doesn't taste bad. I was like, this got to be the breast milk. And like, I just knew, because like it tasted the best out of all of them. So then I was just like, I'm gonna tweet it and just see what people think.
So basically what Josh Hart said was,
my actions don't require any defense. In the same situation, I do it again.
That was Batman from Justice League Doom, an awesome animated cartoon. So I am not married, one. Love my girlfriend, though, of course, Andrea, I love you. And I don't have a kid, so I that's twofold. I'm not on the Josh Hart train. But my good friend Tommy Beer is married. He does have kids. So do you have any idea what Josh Hart is talking about? And do you relate to him in any way?
Okay, listen. The reality is, yes, I agree with him that everybody has at least wondered what it tastes like. However, I've never set up a blind taste test. I've never went that route. I certainly don't want to be cuddled and coddled. I think he a little bit too far in that one. So yes, I can agree that obviously there's some curiosity involved there. But I think that's where I drew the line personally. I didn't cross the threshold.
Yeah, Josh Hart. I feel like he may have some things he's got to work out, given some of the commentary that was going into why he wanted to do this, and it's a little odd.
Yeah, but let's he may have been in the presence of Taylor Rook, so maybe his head was spinning.
That's true.
We'll let him slide there. But yeah, I mean, just big picture before we move on. I totally agree with EJ. They got to bring him back. Ideally, you want to get him on as good a deal as possible. Yes, he didn't shoot well in the Heat series, and you saw the flaws in his game, which were exposed when you play a team 7 times in a row over an 8-day span, 15-day span. Night in, night out, from the moment Josh Hart arrived to the Cleveland series when he was a star in the Cleveland series. Incredibly valuable contributor on the Knicks. Led the Knicks in plus minus a post All-Star break. Was 7th in the NBA, tied with Anthony Davis and Desmond Bane in terms of plus minus. He was plus 150 in his 700 plus minutes of action. The only Knick that was above plus 86 was Emmanuel Quickley, who's plus 117. So again, the Knicks have plenty. I know we think that they need shooters, and yes, they would like you. Behoove them to add shooters this offseason, but keep in mind, Knicks finished 3rd in the NBA in offensive rating last season. They finished 19th in the NBA in defensive rating. They need defenders as well, and Josh Hart is arguably their best perimeter defender. Going up against Jimmy Butler's not easy, etc. But again, what he brings to the table, and let's also, the Knicks now have a superstar. They have a guy that you're going to build ideally a championship team around. And for the first time in a long time, the Knicks have to worry, how do we keep this guy happy? If Julius Randle was a great player, but you don't have to worry about, you hope to have Jalen Brunson for the next 7 years of his career, and you hope that he leads you to the promised land. So you want to make that man happy. Obviously, there's a close relationship between Brunson and Hart. So keep that group together. Kind of get some faith and build some front office equity with the guy you're eventually gonna have to sign to a contract in a couple of years. So I think for all those reasons, Hart wants to stay. The only way the Knicks will let him go is if some team offered him some exorbitant $20+ million.
Yeah, he gets $100 million contract from somebody.
Then you have a decision to make. But the reason I feel really confident in Josh Hart returning to the Knicks is because the Knicks are going to offer anything that's reasonable, and maybe reasonable plus X. And I think Josh Hart would prefer to stay in New York and would accept something reasonable minus X from the Knicks. So I really think it's only a matter of time before they come to that number.
It's one of those situations. I think you may end up seeing it with the Warriors and Draymond Green. We'll see. But it's one of those situations where he means more to the team that he's on currently than he would mean probably to any team that would try to sign him, even if they did try to overpay him. So for all those reasons, I agree. I think Josh Hart does remain a Knick. But let's shifting gears here. Julius Randle, he goes under the knife. The all NBA forward underwent arthroscopic surgery on his left ankle last week, the same ankle that played him through the end of the regular season and postseason. Randle posted a photo to Instagram showing his foot in a cast with the caption, "Road to recovery, just another obstacle." Randle had another tough go around in his second postseason appearance in New York. He averaged just 16 points, 8 rebounds, and shot 37% from the field in his 10 playoff games. Randle is expected to resume basketball activities later this summer and be a full go for training camp in the fall. Tommy, Julius Randle's postseason disappointment was much talked about. I think it remains to be much talked about among Knicks world. Do you feel like Julius Randle having to go through ankle surgery following this playoff run absolves him in any way of his poor performance that we saw in the playoffs?
I think there's both can be true. One, he deserves credit for playing through the injury, and I think a lot of fans kind of jumped on that as kind of their first reaction was, "Wow, he was hurt worse than we suspected." What a warrior! And yes, he deserves credit. Didn't blame the injury, during his post-game press conferences, etc. And listen, we've credited Randle all year for the one thing he does is he shows up. Played the first 77 games a year, started every game, led the league in minutes, second in the league in total minutes played the last 3 years behind only Iron Man, Mikal Bridges. The guy shows up to work, takes pride in showing up to work every day. And in today's NBA, that's a rarity. That's uncommon. So Randle deserves credit for that. That being said, a couple things. this poor performance in the postseason wasn't his first. He was equally as bad 2 years ago in his first postseason series against the Hawks. He also had some moments where he looked good. And just as much as the offensive inefficiency was troubling, and you could, maybe couldn't stop, maybe couldn't jump cut. And he's a guy that relies on his physicality. He's an incredible combination of size, strength, brute force. So he's not like he's just a jump shooter. The ankle, obviously played a role in it. But, it's also important to know other guys are dinged up. Jimmy Butler's been playing with a bum ankle. Jalen Brunson almost missed a game because of an ankle issue.
LeBron James had a torn tendon in his foot playing throughout the playoffs.
When you play 90 NBA basketball games, something's going to be hurting on you. You're still playing in April and May. Something's going to be dinged up. That being said, so that's going to lead us to the question that also has to be discussed: is should Tibbs have limited his playing time, knowing that he clearly wasn't himself? It wasn't just eye test. You could see that the plus minus numbers, etc. The one game that Julius Randle sat out, Obi Toppin started, scored 18 points on 7-11 shooting, grabbed 8 rebounds. So obviously contributed in that way. So I think those are a couple of the issues. And in a weird way, I think the Randle injury is almost like a silver lining for the Knicks if they do decide to trade him, saying like, listen, another team's going to say, listen, he's a great regular season player, but he struggled in the postseason. Leon Rose bounces back and says, hey, yeah, well, maybe, but he was dealing with an ankle injury.
Right, yeah.
So, keep that in mind, yada, yada, yada. So we'll see how it all plays out.
Yeah, I think you laid that out pretty well. For me, I think, and I've given him credit, and I talked about it on the show. I talked about game 1. He was a warrior and helping the Knicks win that game in Cleveland. Like, he deserves credit for going out there and being available and trying to be out there for his guys when duty called. And the fact that he only missed one playoff game during these various ankle injuries he dealt with, it shows a level of toughness that I think we all can respect. The problem is some of the issues that you saw from him, whether it be not hustling, lack of focus. These are things that you see from him when he's 100% healthy. So it's hard for me to watch that performance and say, he didn't close out on that guy. He didn't make that right read. He ran through that double team. He didn't understand where the help defense was coming from because he had a bad ankle. To me, that doesn't compute. Now, maybe missing some shots. Maybe I give him a little more of a break there. Maybe him not being able to finish as well around the basket in certain places. Maybe I give him a little bit more of a break there. But some of these plays where he's, just seems like he's on another planet mentally, I can't absolve him for. So it becomes like almost like maybe a partial absolving situation where maybe I kind of give him a break on some of the shot making not being there the way it was in the regular season. But some of the intangible things that I've seen him have issues with, regardless of whether he's healthy or hurt, still happening. I can't absolve him for that. I can't.
And the perfect illustration was the turnover at half court, and he just throws his arm up.
Yeah.
Doesn't even jog back. Maybe you can't sprint, maybe you can't stop short, but at least make an effort instead of, blaming somebody else for your bad turnover and kind of throwing your hands up in the air. That is not an ankle injury. And again, I think you're perfectly right. The poor field goal percentage could be attributable to the ankle injury, even though it was actually worse field goal percentage against the Hawks.
Yeah, he's like 29% against the Hawks, which was crazy.
The numbers are nasty
this time around. Yeah.
Right. But again, he's the type of player that it tends to bleed onto the other side of the floor. So where does the ankle issue start, and where does the other stuff kind of all, it's all wrapped up into one? But yeah, I that's a good point. Is and I meant to make it as well as you can forgive some of the stuff, but again, some of it's not effort, some of it's not injury related. It's that body language stuff that irks a lot of Knicks fans.
And I do think you make a good point too about Tibbs and the coaching, because we've seen Tibbs do this in the postseason in the past. Like, I don't know if you remember that run the Chicago Bulls had where, I think Rose didn't actually play, and it seemed like everybody on their team was suffering through some serious injury. Like Luol Deng had to go to the hospital because of something he was dealing with.
That was Nate Robinson was playing like 47 minutes.
Yeah, right? Nate Robinson was being, driven to the pedal to the metal during that series. I think they were playing Brooklyn, I want to say maybe. Yeah, exactly. And it was like they were like, it was like a morgue. We were seeing that roster, and part of the reason why some of these guys, Luol Deng was never the same. after that series. So I do think there has to be questions asked about how Thibodeau's playing these guys, not necessarily leading up to Randle getting hurt. Like he stepped on a guy's foot. That happens.
Right,
I'm not at all talking about that. I'm talking about once you know a guy is injured, how are you managing their time and minutes to get the best out of them? Because not only did we see that with Tibbs in Chicago, we saw that the season prior to this past season with Alec Burks. Alec Burks had played a whole season where, Kemba Walker didn't work out. And for half the season, he was asked to play point guard and was playing like superstar minutes. And then after the season, we learned the guy needed foot surgery and he wasn't even ready to start the next season. And you're like, how is a guy who isn't even capable of playing point guard being asked to play point guard for that many minutes? And he's playing on a bad foot and a foot that needs surgery. Like, how is that? And this is not Julius Randle. This is not a guy who's an all-star caliber player. This is Alec Burks.
With Emmanuel quickly on the bench behind him.
Right, and you have other capable guys, just like the Knicks had another capable power forward in Julius Randle. Like, they needed Randle to play in his game. I'm not saying sit him on the bench, but how many stretches in those games do we see Randle struggle for long stretches, and he's dealing with a bad ankle, and he's just, again, riding him till the wheels fall off. Like, some things about this coach I can't wrap my head around, but this continues to be an issue with him. He doesn't seem to care about where a guy is from his health standpoint and how, okay, guy's playing and that's great, and now he's available, but perhaps be careful of how you're using him once he's out there. Because Julius Randle, assuming he's on the team next year and assuming he's on the team for the foreseeable future, it seems like the Knicks want to make a commitment. They've already made a commitment to him to be that guy. He's not a guy you're going to need just for that playoff series last year against Miami or against Cleveland. You're going to need him next season, the season after that, potentially the season after that. So there's got to be some thought process behind that. Like, Tibbs is not a guy coaching on a 1-year deal. The final year of his 4-year deal got picked up into a 5th-year deal in his first year in New York. The guy has plenty of time left here on his contract. There's no reason for him to be coaching with this ridiculous urgency in terms of running guys into the ground. It's very odd because then he coaches in other ways that, like, he has no urgency. When it comes to playing guys who are injured or playing guys who are banged up, that he has the most urgency to put guys out there and perhaps put them at risk.
And that's the frustrating thing, is because if it wasn't Randle, if it was, RJ Barrett or IQ or Obi, and they were dinged up, would he err on the side of caution and not put those guys in? And that's
Quentin Grimes earlier this season, I was told that we had to start Evan Fournier because we needed shooting, which again was ridiculous to me. Quentin Grimes hit like 7 airy threes in his first start with the Knicks the previous year. But also it was like, well, Quentin Grimes is hurt and we gotta work him back and we gotta be careful. So I had to watch like 20 games of Evan Fournier being an absolute sieve defensively for the Knicks for them to decide, hey, you know what, maybe we should put, I don't know, the best on-ball defender on the team in the starting line to play next to Jalen Brunson, who we know can't defend. Like, you're right. He picks and chooses his battles with where he prioritizes certain things with this team. And it continues to be a liability for the team, and it continues to be a blind spot for him as a coach.
Yeah, I mean, can't help but think that the relationship between he and Randle, his inability to call out Randle when it needs to be done and criticize Randle. We had another perfect example. Mike Malone, game 2 of the NBA Finals, ripped into his guys. And we just haven't seen that with Tibbs and Randle, and that's one of the reasons why you and I, why both of us are worried, are cautious of bringing both of these guys back next season, because it's that issue remains apparent.
And talking about Michael Malone, what a novel thought! A coach who did not have to watch the film, did not have to watch the game 3 or 4 times to look at that and say, my team didn't have enough effort and focus. There were certain guys that did not have the right focus and energy. When they missed shots, they didn't play defense, and that's why we lost this game. It's a novel thought. I'm told by Tom Thibodeau that you can only talk about the game after the game has been played. And you can't talk about people's effort because at the end of the day, it's all about a team. That's all I hear every single time Thibodeau speaks. But yet a guy who, I don't know, is coaching the NBA Finals, I think he's doing pretty well for himself. He's able to watch a game be played and immediately say, this is a problem with this team. But with the Knicks, we're not allowed to do that because the head coach says you have to wait until you watch the game 2, 3, maybe 4 times before making an observation, which is crazy because sometimes you play back-to-back. So are you really watching it 4 times where you play the next game? So are you going to the game just having never came up to a conclusion of what happened the previous game? I mean, it's just nonsense, the stuff that Tip says. Lastly, on Randle, any concern about his readiness for next season?
No, it sounds like, Woj made it clear, it wasn't just the Knicks saying that they expect me ready. So it
Yeah.
sounds like he'll be ready for the training camp, let alone the regular season. And, obviously, if one of the reasons he may have had to, again, we don't even know the details of it. Surprise, surprise, the Knicks aren't forthcoming. Did he tweak it, walking his dog, like something like that could have happened in the 3 weeks since he played. Maybe they were waiting for it to rest and it wasn't rest, so they just wanted to go in and clean it up. What was the extent of the surgery? But from everything we hear, again, if it was the playoffs, he probably could still be playing, let alone not needing surgery. If it was the regular season, he probably could take a week off and then play again, yada, yada, yada. But you have the benefit of 3 months off, so you might as well have, get the surgery cleaned up, etc. So I don't have any concern at the moment. We'll obviously wait until once we get closer. I'm sure we'll see some workout videos that'll assuage our concerns.
Yep. Hopefully Randle can come back and be healthy and the ankle won't be an ongoing, lingering thing coming into this next season. So lastly, call him Captain America. Jalen Brunson is expected to represent Team USA in the 2023 FIBA World Cup. Mark Stein was the first to report that Brunson would join a roster that includes Tyrese Halliburton, Austin Reeves, Anthony Edwards, Mikal Bridges, and Bobby Portis. Brandon Ingram and Jaren Jackson have both also been reportedly asked and will eventually join the team as well. The FIBA World Cup begins in Japan, Indonesia, and the Philippines on August 25th. The first game for Team USA in group play is against New Zealand on August 26th. So Jalen Brunson named to Team USA for the FIBA World Cup. He will be playing for Steve Kerr, who's the head coach of Team USA. How do you feel about Jalen Brunson playing on Team USA? Are you okay with it? Are you concerned about potential health risks that come with him playing with Team USA this summer?
Yeah, I mean, my initial reaction was like, Knick fans were celebrating. My first thought was, I would prefer him just be on a beach somewhere and not even pick up a basketball because we know that he's going to get pushed to the limit, under Tibbs next season and going forward. That being said, these guys, Brunson's a hard worker. He's going to be working out diligently, no matter if it's in a gym or with Team USA, etc. Instead of playing pickup games, he's going to be playing, Team USA scrimmages and games, etc. And the other benefit is developing relationships with some of the other star players. We've seen how
That's true.
It kind of yielded some fruit. Obviously there's the LeBron and
The
KD,
big three in Miami.
KD and Kyrie, the big three in Miami, the KD and Kyrie. Some people attribute that back to their relationship that they developed while playing for Team USA. So we'll see if Brunson kind of befriends some of the other stars that are going to make up Team USA. Could be interesting.
Yeah, I mean it's weird. It's like a bittersweet moment. Like it's like for me, it's like wow, Jalen Brunson being recognized on Team USA, them inviting him to play on their team. And I know this is not necessarily the redeem team or the dream team. We don't have a roster of that kind of stars, but it is a decent squad, and he is maybe the best player on this team considering the guys they brought on. I mean, maybe Anthony Edwards, maybe Tyrese Halliburton, maybe argue with Tyrese Halliburton. I think. And Mikal Bridges, of course, his buddy from Villanova. So Brunson will be heavily featured. So that's going to be really exciting to see him wearing the red, white, and blue, representing the Knicks for Team USA. Though there is that underlying thing of, hey, you don't want him to get hurt. And how many minutes he's playing, how will this factor into what the season will happen. And look, I've been consistent, whether it be with Team USA or these international competitions in basketball. I was very vocal and was fighting with people on WFAN about the World Baseball Classic, especially after Edwin Diaz of the Mets got injured. He's their closer for those who don't watch baseball. He got injured playing for Team Puerto Rico. This is part of the games. The sport is a global sport. So this comes with that. So you're going to have players in your teams. If they're good, they're going to be asked to play for their national teams. Team Canada is going to be in this tournament. RJ Barrett will almost certainly be playing for Team Canada. So their Knicks will have at least two guys playing in the FIBA World Cup. There's some concern there, but I'm going to kind of maybe twist and try to see the silver lining in it beyond just the pride that you have in seeing the Knicks out there. Is I think you'll have maybe RJ and Jalen Brunson come in tip-top shape. They'll come in ready to go. Like how many times did we see Carmelo Anthony, have that Olympic experience and come in raring to go to start the season? I think that he'll be sharp. They won't have this kind of rushed to start the season. Like Jalen Brunson in his first year in New York, not that he started off poor, but like first game wasn't that great. He kind of had to kind of get into the groove of things before he really finally took off. Like I think you'll see Jalen Brunson come and hit the ground running because he has now been playing competitive basketball against other high-end players, from August until early September, right into training camp. It will be smart. It will be important and careful for Tibbs to be mindful of his minutes early in the season. Will he? I have zero faith that he will. Zero. Tommy laughs because it's like, give me a break. But I hope somebody goes to Tibbs and says, hey, like this is a marathon, and Jalen has now started his season a month before most of the other NBA players have. Be mindful of that, especially early on. Like we know by the time we get to deciphering where the seeding is going to be, deciphering, obviously playoff games and trying to win playoff games. Brunson's going to be in that 40-minute range. Like that's going to happen, but it's going to be a marathon, not a sprint. So the Knicks going to have to be smart about how they use him throughout the season so that we don't have the FIBA World Cup to blame for why Brunson's run out of gas in April and May. And
fortunately, the Knicks have plenty of depth back there.
They do. Right.
They got obviously not only Emmanuel Quickley, 6-man of the year candidate, but also Deuce McBride. Maybe get him some run earlier in the season, and somebody we haven't talked about much on the pod yet, but Rokas Jokubaitis, a player.
Yeah, what's the deal with him? I've been waiting to see Rokas.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if he plays in the summer league this year. But he's continuing to play for FC Barcelona out in the ACB league in Spain, which is basically the second best league in the world behind the NBA. So it'll be interesting if the Knicks don't bring him over. Might they use him as a trade chip in a deal? But he was voted the rising star in the ACB league last season. So not a really high ceiling guy, but a player that has proven his worth. Didn't quite take this step that I think a lot of Knicks fans were hoping, a lot of Barcelona fans are hoping that he would kind of, impress and move to that next level this season. Kind of plateaued, took a step back even in some respects. But we'll see if they bring him over for either summer league or training camp.
Yeah, I think that Rokas kind of ends up being kind of a mystery man here. A lot of people want to see what this kid can do. A lot of promise from what we've seen from him playing for his international teams, whether it be Lithuania, whether it be, of course, for FC Barcelona, or FB Barcelona, I guess. I don't know how that works, but
good call. Yeah, you're right, FB.
Yeah.
But the only thing is now with Brunson in the mix, that changes the calculus. There's just long term.
Yeah, exactly. And
unless he's content being a backup, unless they want the Knicks won't go that route,
Yeah, and that's almost why I'm actually curious because I don't remember exactly what Deuce's deal is, but I almost wonder.
He has a team option, so the Knicks will have to make a decision on him.
So I almost wonder if they say, Rokas, chill out for another year. We're going to evaluate Deuce.
Right.
And if Deuce can cement being the third string point guard and the guy who kind of is on the periphery of the rotation, then they'll trade Rokas. And if he's not, then they'll just let Deuce walk and say, all right, come on over, Rokas. You're the new third string point guard.
Yep.
And by the time that we get to that season, like the whole team landscape could be entirely different. We don't know where Emmanuel Quickley is. We don't know how they're using Emmanuel Quickley. Maybe he's playing more two guard. Like we don't know how the team looks. It could be very different, especially if the Knicks end up making some massive trade for a superstar between now and then. Lastly, quickly on the Team USA bit, like I mentioned, some of the guys that'll be on this team that we've heard about: Brunson, Halliburton, Mikal Bridges, Austin Reeves, Anthony Edwards, Bobby Portis, Ingram, Jaren Jackson. How do you feel this team will fare given the roster they put together so far?
Yeah, I think they'll be good. I like the idea that Brunson's kind of a lot of young guys, a lot of youth on the roster. So I like the idea that Brunson's going to kind of affirm himself as the leader and sort of Captain America, as you said, of the team. So I think that's interesting, something to keep an eye on. I think it'll just only benefit him as he kind of grows into his role as captain of the Knicks.
Yeah, I think that they'll be fine. But I know there were a lot of jokes about how this team is going to struggle. Look, the expectations of Team USA have to be different. I think that you should expect gold, but I think they could lose games. Like we saw with Greg Popovich, they lost multiple games. Prior to the tournament, I think they actually lost a game in the last international tournament. So they may not go undefeated, but I still think they should be the favorites. And I think that they'll probably be at least one, maybe even two other big names that join on that we haven't heard about yet. Maybe it's a guy that's playing in the NBA Finals. Maybe it's a guy that maybe is still kind of deciphering whether they want to play and end up committing. We still got a long time between now and August. So I think the Team USA will be just fine. I think the fact that they have Jalen Brunson actually makes me feel a lot better about this team because I think that he's shown that he's a winning player.
Yes.
So you put him in the backcourt with Andy Edwards, put Mikal Bridges on the wing. You got Jaren Jackson, man, in the middle. It should be a fun team. It should be a fun tournament. I feel like international basketball now is probably about as even as maybe it's ever been in terms of the amount of good teams who can field competitive rosters. So we'll see how many of the big stars play in the World Cup. A lot of them, definitely play in the Olympics. So we'll see how that works out. But if the other big international stars play for their teams, then it should be a great tournament. Should be a lot of fun.
Before we wrap up, 1-1 in the finals. You alluded to it. I assume you're surprised by Miami taking game 2. Do they have a real chance to make this really interesting now?
Answer the first question. I'm not as surprised as you thought because I had them in 6 or the Nuggets in 6. So there were going to be wins there. I didn't necessarily think that they would only be in Miami. So I'm not so surprised they took game 2. But to answer the second question, while I didn't think they had that much of a chance heading into the series, I now think that they're really viable in the series. I just really was concerned about how long there were stretches in that game with Denver where they seemed to lack the kind of focus and discipline necessary to win a championship. Now, they're so much more talented than this team that maybe they could get away with that for over the course of a 7-game series. But as we've seen with Miami, you cannot play with your food against this team. This is the last team you can kind of give extra confidence to. And to see so many guys wide open on threes, so many kind of mental errors happening, guys not closing out correctly, that was a little alarming. Because when you get to this point and you're playing for the NBA Finals, Michael Malone said it, like there should be a level of sharp focus that, you're ironclad in what you're trying to do and knowing that other team. It's almost like they won that first game and kind of expected to kind of, put it in cruise control right to a 4-game sweep. Like this is the Miami Heat. That's not going to happen. So if the Nuggets continue to play with that kind of apathy, then the Heat have a great chance to win the series.
Yeah, I'm going to go the other direction. I think that was a kind of 1-game slip up by Denver. I think Malone will have them kind of tighten the screws. I was surprised that Nuggets are only given 2.5 in Miami. I think they'll win comfortably game 3. I think they're a better team. I think they're a deeper team. Obviously, Miami has stumbled upon regardless of what Spo wants to say, they're making Jokic a pass, making Jokic a shooter.
What was he yelling about with that?
I don't know.
I will say he is a coach that does not like when people talk about strategy. Like I've seen him in the past kind of bristle at questions like that. So maybe that was his thing doing there. And apparently him and Ramona Shelburne were laughing, joking afterwards. So that could have been what was happening there.
So yeah. But I just think, I think Murray's going to bounce back. Porter Jr.'s an X factor. I think he was invisible in game 2. Obviously I think he should step up. And plus the Heat just made shots, they were terrible in game 1. They made shots in game 2. I think that the Nuggets haven't played anything close to their A game, let alone a B+ game. Jokic has obviously been terrific, but their kind of surrounding pieces have been up and down. Get a little more from Bruce Brown, a little bit more from Aaron Gordon, and Butler hasn't been great. Talking about guys with ankle injury, he hasn't looked the same since his ankle injury. So, listen, I've learned not to count out the Heat. So, it's not like, they're going to blow their doors off and then cruise to a 5. I could definitely see it going 6 or something along those lines. But I am surprised that at the, Vegas, the odds have shifted as dramatically as they have, just in terms of, I think Denver's only plus 260 right now or something along those lines. So, I don't, my view of Denver, my pick of Denver, I'm not overly concerned about. I think even if they win 1 of 2 in Miami, they can win, game 5 at home and then game 6 in Miami, et cetera. They have game 7 at home. So, I'm just, as a basketball fan, I'm happy that we have an exciting series ahead of us.
Yeah, it should be a fun series down the stretch. Porter, KCP, and Jeff Green. I thought they had disaster classes in game 2. That cannot repeat if they're going to get back on track. That will do it for this edition of Orange and Blue Bloods. Thank you guys so much for checking us out. Of course, we are a podcast you can find wherever you get your podcasts, including the free Audacy app. Hit the download feature on your streaming service. Get these episodes every time we drop. Also, check us out on YouTube. You can find us on the WFAN channel. You can find us on the Audacy Sports channel. Check us out on either spot. Tommy, let the people know they can find you.
At Tommy Beer on Twitter.
You can find me, EJ_Stewart on Twitter, Action EJ on Instagram and TikTok. And check out New Generation Media, my own YouTube channel. We're doing NBA draft coverage. We have a new video out now talking about NBA Fact or Fiction regarding the NBA draft. So plenty of good conversations there. Check me out on YouTube as well. Find that NU Generation Media. That'll do it for now. Thank you guys again so much for checking us out. For Tommy, I'm EJ. Take it easy, guys. Peace. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below.
Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date on our latest podcast ventures. Links will be in the descriptions. And as always, thanks for watching, and we will see you in our next video.